I was there when it happened. The kind of night where the desert feels endless, where the air inside the listening post hums with recycled cold, and the stars outside stare back with ancient indifference. My shift had been routine for hours, just me, the endless chatter of background noise from space, and the comfort of knowing nothing ever really changes out here. Then it came. At first, it was so faint I thought my headphones had caught a glitch. A tone, then another, rising and falling in a rhythm too deliberate to be random. My hands froze over the console as the display lit up with cascading waves, each perfectly aligned, each step building into something greater. 72 seconds. That's all it lasted. Long enough to change everything I thought I knew about the universe. This wasn't static. Not cosmic background radiation. Not the accidental echo of a pulsar or the random chatter of a distant quasar. This was structured. Intentional. Something, or someone, had sent it. The sound filled the control room in a way that seemed to crawl under my skin, vibrating in my bones, whispering in a voice just beyond the reach of comprehension. I should have been elated. Humanity had dreamed for centuries about hearing something like this, proof that we weren't alone. But as the seconds ticked on, I felt an unease I couldn't shake. It wasn't welcoming. It wasn't a greeting or a call for peace. It sounded like the warning. When the final note cut out, the silence that followed felt heavier than the sound itself. I realized then that the cosmos hadn't just spoken, it had chosen us to hear. And deep down, I knew the universe had just shifted, and nothing would ever be the same. Within hours, the array was no longer mine. The quiet, half-abandoned desert facility that had always felt forgotten was suddenly alive with motion, blades thundering overhead, black SUVs kicking up dirt, soldiers in unmarked uniforms surrounding the compound like we had stumbled onto a war zone. Men and women in suits with unreadable eyes poured into the lab, snapping orders, confiscating hard drives, sealing every door. My workstation, the console where I had first heard the signal, was stripped bare before I could even protest. We were forced into the briefing room, a half-lit space that smelled of dust and stale coffee. Screens flickered to life as the recording of the signal played again, over and over. I watched seasoned scientists, people who had spent their entire lives hoping for proof of life beyond Earth, stiffen as the structure became undeniable. Some tried to rationalize, to explain it away as natural phenomena, but the fear in their eyes betrayed them. We all knew. It wasn't random. The sequence was layered, deliberate, mathematical in a way that felt purposeful yet alien. And the conclusion was inescapable. It wasn't directed at Earth. It passed asterisk through asterisk us, projected outward into space as if Earth itself were just a relay station, a waypoint on a much larger path. When one of the mathematicians translated the frequency shifts into a spatial grid, the room went silent. They weren't words. They were asterisk asterisk coordinates dot asterisk asterisk, and the coordinates extended far beyond our solar system. A chill went through me as I realized what that meant. The signal wasn't just telling us something, it was asterisk announcing asterisk something. Like a flare shot into the sky, marking Earth's position in the void. And then the terrifying thought struck me, if the message wasn't meant for us, then someone else had heard it. 3 nights later, the answer arrived, and it was nothing any of us could have prepared for. The skies above our world had always seemed eternal, a dome of quiet stars far beyond our reach. But on that night, those stars began to move. The first report came from an orbital telescope over Hawaii, a cluster of massive objects emerging from the black, just beyond Neptune's orbit. They weren't meteors or comets, they moved too smoothly, too deliberately, gliding with a kind of coordination no natural body ever possessed. At first there were only a handful, then dozens, then hundreds. By the time the data reached our screens, the count was still climbing. I stood shoulder to shoulder with generals, physicists, and officials whose faces were drained of all color, watching the radar map bloom with red contacts. They weren't broadcasting. They weren't trying to communicate. They simply advanced, silent and patient, as though following a call we could no longer deny. Someone whispered that they had been waiting. That the 72-second signal was never meant for us, but for asterisk them star. A beacon cast into the void, telling predators where to find prey. My stomach knotted as the truth settled in. We hadn't just detected a message, we had triggered a chain reaction. By listening, by recording, by replaying, we had amplified it across every monitoring station on Earth. We had taken the bait and shone it brighter. Now they were coming, slipping through the dark like wolves through tall grass, invisible but undeniable. No propulsion trails, no heat signatures, just the cold certainty of their approach. For the first time in my life, staring at those advancing shadows, I felt what it truly meant to be small. And worse, I felt what it meant to be hunted. The truth did not come to us in a single revelation, it leaked out in fragments, forced from the mouths of men and women who had spent their entire careers keeping it buried. I remember sitting in the dimly lit control center, the tension so thick it pressed against my chest, as dusty files and encrypted briefings were finally unlocked. Words like asterisk classified since 1947 asterisk eyes only asterisk, and asterisk project sealed by executive order asterisk scrolled across the screens. It turned out Earth had been contacted before. Not once. Not twice. Many times. The encounters had always been concealed beneath layers of denial and deception, mysterious lights dismissed as weather balloons, crashed vessels covered up as experimental aircraft, unexplained disappearances written off as accidents. All lies, woven carefully to keep humanity's ignorance intact. One file shook me to my core. It described a war, though not one we had ever fought ourselves. According to those faded reports, an ancient enemy had once scoured this region of space, consuming civilizations like fire racing across a field of dry grass. For reasons no one understood, they had bypassed Earth, or perhaps been driven away by forces unknown. Humanity's survival had been a fluke, not a triumph. Now it became horrifyingly clear what the 72-second signal represented. It wasn't the first. It was merely the first we had the arrogance to amplify openly, letting the whole world know. We had reawakened something old, something patient, something waiting for the faintest whisper that prey had stirred again. I remember staring at those reports, my throat dry, realizing that every lie told by governments, every cover-up, every piece of buried evidence, they weren't about control or secrecy. They were about buying us time. Because the moment the universe remembered we were here, the hunt would begin anew. They arrived faster than any model or prediction dared suggest. One moment the skies were ours, the next they were carved apart by shadows so vast they blotted out constellations. Orbital telescopes captured their silhouettes sliding into position above Earth, colossal shapes gliding silently, their hulls darker than the void itself. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't demand surrender. They just hovered, watching. Panic rippled through every government on Earth. Emergency broadcasts were silenced, military forces scrambled, and satellites reoriented as though 1,000 eyes had suddenly opened in the heavens. Nuclear warheads were armed, warships redeployed, fighter squadrons scrambled. And yet, despite all our preparations, a gnawing truth haunted every commander and scientist alike: our weapons were designed for ourselves not for something that could drift through space like a shadow and cross the solar system in days. Then, without warning, one of their vessels broke formation. It wasn't the largest, nor the smallest, but its descent was deliberate, almost ceremonial. The world held its breath as the object cut through the atmosphere, wrapped in silence instead of fire. It did not head for the centers of power: Washington, Moscow, Beijing. It ignored our cities, our armies, our capitals. It came for us. For me. The craft landed less than 200 meters from the array, settling on the desert floor with impossible grace, its hull gleaming like obsidian in moonlight. Dust swirled around it, and then there was nothing but stillness. No ramp, no hatch, no weapon bristling from its sides. Just waiting. I felt the weight of every eye on me: soldiers, scientists, generals. And in that moment, I understood with terrifying clarity. Of all the people on Earth, of all the leaders and armies, they had chosen me. Not as a soldier. Not as a leader. As an ambassador. When the hatch finally opened, it wasn't with a dramatic hiss of pressure or the grinding of gears. It simply folded away as though the material itself bent to an unseen will. A figure emerged, tall and angular, its movement smooth like flowing water. The soldiers around me tensed, rifles raised, fingers white against their triggers. But the being made no hostile gesture. Instead, a device unfurled in its hand, glowing faintly with a shifting lattice of light. The first sounds it made were harsh, like rocks grinding together, but then the lattice pulsed, reshaping the noise into broken fragments of English. The words that came through chilled me more than any threat could have. Predators. Old. Hunting worlds. Seeding traps. You triggered one. The signal hadn't come from them. It had come from something older, something far more dangerous. The 72 seconds had been a lure, a thread of sound spun into the dark, designed to catch the attention of the very creatures these beings feared. And we, in our hunger for discovery, had pulled on that thread until the trap was set. I stared at the alien's obsidian black eyes, realizing what it was saying. They hadn't come to conquer us. They hadn't come to offer peace. They had come because we were bait, an unwilling piece in a war that had begun long before humanity learned to write. My mouth went dry as the translation device continued. We fight, or flee. You cannot flee. The meaning sank in like ice through my veins. They weren't here to save us. They were here to watch us burn, to see if humanity was strong enough to distract the predators that hunted them. And in that instant, one terrifying truth crystallized: to them, we weren't prey. We were a weapon they intended to use. The predators came faster than anyone had dared imagine, slipping through the void like living shadows. They weren't ships in any sense we understood, they were massive, writhing constructs of bone, metal, and darkness, each one large enough to swallow entire cities whole. Their eyes, or what passed for eyes, glowed with an intelligence that made every instinct in me scream for survival. Earth's defenses activated, a symphony of fire and steel stretching from the orbital platforms down to the railguns hidden in mountain bunkers. Yet even as our weapons flared, the predators seemed unfazed, gliding through the chaos with terrifying patience. And then it happened. The fleet that had followed them, the ones we had thought might be our saviors, our ancient watchers, they retreated. They had sent us the warning, the tools, the knowledge, but they would not fight. That realization should have broken me. But instead, something inside me snapped into focus. Humanity doesn't wait for salvation. Humanity doesn't cower in the dark. Humanity fights. I felt it in every corner of the globe, the fire of resistance, the stubborn defiance, the unshakable will that had allowed us to survive countless catastrophes before the universe even knew we existed. Hidden arsenals ignited, orbital railguns slammed their payloads into the predators, and fighter craft swarmed like bees around a colossal hornet. The predators struck back, tearing through structures and sky alike, but every strike was met with a counter we had barely had time to prepare. Hours bled into a nightmare of fire and shadow, and when the dust finally settled, the void was littered with the remains of the hunters. Earth was scarred, cities in ruins, but humanity stood. And I looked up at the stars and understood something fundamental: the universe thought it could intimidate us, that it could hunt us like cattle. It was wrong. We didn't just survive. We answered. We fought back. We burned brighter than any predator had imagined. Humanity, fuck yeah.